So I want to bring in quickly my guest for this hour, trial attorney Christa Ramey. Christa, great to see you. Thanks again for being on the show. I want to ask you, how do you think Michael Humphrey's doing? He's a guy, he's a convicted murderer in this particular case. He obviously lied at various times, but I tell you what, he's doing pretty well on the stand.
Well, I think he is. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he holds up under cross. But when you add his testimony to the other testimony of the co-conspirators that had also been given immunity, it really kind of compounds what's happening here with this witness. I think that the prosecution's doing a fantastic job. It's going to be difficult to see holes punched in this by the defendant's attorney.
Yeah, I mean, he has a little bit to work with, Christa. I mean, in his opening statement, he mentioned the fact that everybody involved is looking for a deal. Everybody who's testifying against Lindley looking for a deal. They're all testifying. The claim is that, they were put under pressure by the police and they gave them the story, especially Ashley Shaw. She's one that she did everything. She's not really saying that Lindley did a lot of things, so I was a little suspect of that. But I agree with you. Once you start piling all of that testimony on top of each other, it can become very, very strong.
Absolutely. And they all have motives to lie. They all have lied in the past to the police, and these are the things that the defense is going to work with. And I think that the attorney for the defendant did a very good job on cross-examination so far today in that regard. It's, when do you believe a witness? If you believe a witness is lying about one thing, you can disregard all of their testimony. That's a jury instruction in every single state in this country. So, I think that that's kind of where he's going with this, to pile it on. But it is pretty compelling evidence. And people know that witnesses make deals for immunity to testify. So I don't think that this is going to be a big shock to the jurors.
Yeah, when you have a murder, right, you got to take murderers to maybe testify if they were involved. One interesting little point that I want to make that I think adds credibility to Michael Humphrey's testimony. He mentions, and it was asked by the prosecutor, had he ever met Ben? And he says, no, I never met Ben. And the reason why that's important is because prosecutors believe the way he was murdered with a gunshot initially to the back of the head, to the stem of the neck, he must have known, because he turned his back, he must have known his killer. He was in there, he was comfortable, turned his back on his killer, and then was shot. If he didn't know Ben, I'm not sure. I mean, if Ben didn't know Michael, I doubt if he would have turned his back on him that way. What do you think about that little tidbit and the prosecution using that to their advantage?
I think that would be very important if this was in Ben's home where the murder occurred, but it was in fact at his where he bred his snakes, and where I would assume that people would come and purchase snakes. So I would imagine that oftentimes when you're walking through your place of business, you might turn your back on a potential customer. So I don't know that it has as much of an impact as it would if it was in if the murder would have taken place in a more intimate setting.
Fair enough. And he did mention that when he brought her, when she brought him in, she said he was a friend from high school who was interested in snakes. So you make a good point.